So Brian,
that's me.
That is you. We've been trying to figure out for a while who our Romanian listeners are. We've been looking at.
Wait, we have Romanian listeners?
Yeah, we have a few of them.
Yeah.
It's pretty
What's
cool.
up, Romania? You're the one European country we haven't alienated.
It's yeah.
Well,
Unfortunately, we might be about to. No. So thanks in part to What a Hell of a Way to Die and all of the new listeners that we've gotten as a result of that. Thank you, Nate Bethea.
We love you, Nate.
We are getting more of a listenership, which is cool. And also welcome to all of the new people who have come on board. We're really excited to have you listening to our show.
Hello, welcome to hell.
One of the things that I've noticed, and I was talking about this with Brian, is that we actually have quite a few listeners in Romania now. And so we've been trying to figure out who the hell these Romanian listeners are. And I think it was last night, Brian, that you sent along this series of tweets to me. We think we might have identified at least one of our Romanian listeners. This is from user Talus, handle at talisman_knows, KNOWS.
Okay.
Would you... Would you suck a penis instead of going to prison? There's actually a very simple personality test that I developed myself that can tell precisely who would serve the jail time and who would suck a penis to get out of it. I'm going to explain it to you now.
This is a thread?
Thread.
What?
as I said, quoting this original tweet when I messaged it to you, desperate for cock voice.
Absolutely. Let me
Just
actually
salivating at the
let me
thought,
perform this in a manner that sounds a little bit more desperate for cock. Let's imagine the government, the police, and the military gave everybody this ultimatum. A very funny thing would happen. Many would suck the penis, but they wouldn't do it quietly. If they sucked the penis, they would make you feel guilty for not sucking the penis. LOL, you're going to get locked up. Bad things are going to happen to you. Why don't you just suck the penis like everybody else? With enough of them doing it, the shame and stigma of surrendering your manhood in this way would vanish. It would become the norm. Those of us who refuse to suck the penis
getting more
would
manhood.
suffer.
Yeah.
Prison sentences imposed on us. We would be locked up, unable to live our lives as normal. But here is the crazy thing. Eventually, those of us who didn't suck penis would be vindicated. With enough people resisting, the government wouldn't be able to lock us up. Protests would break out, riots in some countries. How dare you tell us what to do with our bodies, we would cry. There is no way the government could actually impose this on all of us. Those who sucked the penis would naturally take the government's side, their pride gone and shamed by those who refused. They would brand the resistance as bad guys against the greater good. If we all just sucked penis, life would return to normal, right? Well, knowing governments, they wouldn't even set the penis suckers free. All the penis was sucked, but it's hard to tell who sucked it. Those I sucked penis QR codes are easily bought or fake, so it tries to lock those people up too. The penis suckers blame the non-suckers. Eventually, the government would just drop it. You can't lock everybody up. And once the government realized this, their ridiculous policy would be dropped. Those who didn't suck penis could continue life as normal. But here's the kicker.
Oh, here's the kicker.
We held out. And we won. No penis sucked. We would now live in a strange aftermath where we would walk around looking each other in the eye. Life is normal. But I know that you sucked that penis. You surrendered your body and your dignity to the wild demands of the government, and you can never unsuck it. So back to my original question.
You really can't.
You can absolutely unsuck a penis. I've done it.
So back to my original question.
You vomit on it.
How do you know if your friends would suck penis to avoid jail or not? Simple. Ask them their vaccination status. Game over, guys.
This guy, his bio is really just like his name and then the fact that he's in Romania, which is 41% vaccinated. There is no law there or anywhere putting people in prison for not getting the vaccine.
Rough stuff.
Anywhere in the world, actually.
So many questions.
How would he know that I sucked the penis?
But I think my main one
Very
is
carefully.
when he says they would not suck the dick quietly, I was like, so it's a big sloppy blowjob? It's a lot of like...
You're shouting and singing the whole time.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the worst of all possible worlds, the first and only podcast willing to suck a penis instead of going to prison. I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
And I'm the worst of all possible Brians. Yeah, Richard Maxwell, he's back in town, or back in another town.
Ooh.
In the loop. If you know what I mean.
The loop, but he may or may not. Actually, that's the one thing about...
It sounds like he's not actually near the loop.
It's hard to tell because they talk about later on, and we'll get to this.
They say North University, which is Northwestern, which is not near the loop at all, right?
Well, it might be Northwestern, or it might be North Park, which is a Christian university. Also possible. But we're back to Whit's Endless Summer once again. For those of you who are...
It's always summer in America.
Joining this first time around.
We are moving out of the Whittaker of our discontent and are now moving into Spring's Awitkening.
Absolutely.
Oh boy.
And these are all parts, of course, of Whit's Endless Summer, the sub-series of the worst of all possible worlds, where we listen to and recap episodes of Adventures in Odyssey.
Because you all asked for this.
You just wanted it so
I'm going to
bad.
be honest, a lot of people asking for this.
They are.
They are more and more.
They're demanding our doors. We're getting threads from Romanians about it. It's
Waylaid in the Windy City, which
fucking wimdy.
It windy.
It is very windy.
It's always been interesting to me how Adventures in Odyssey, which is a show that was created in Southern California. Mm-hmm. Recorded in there for the longest time and produced in Colorado, has this deeply, deeply Midwestern vibe.
And Dobson is from Louisiana.
Right.
Like a lot of these guys aren't actually Midwesterners.
In the cultural imagination of the Midwest, Chicago, America's second city, which is sooner or later actually going to be our fourth most populous city behind New York, LA, and Houston. I am, of us, the only one who grew up in the Midwest. And Chicago is the most important city in the Midwest. Culturally, economically, it is one of my favorite cities. It has a certain speed to it, due in part to the fact that it is actually the heart of the American railway system. Mm-hmm. It is always has been important for American industry, but it's also the city that a lot of kids who grow up in the Midwest, myself included, see as the exciting cosmopolitan place that you go if you want to do something exciting. This episode then is a two-parter that is a lot of fast-paced sort of cloak and dagger shit, really leans a little bit into Whit's history. I think for the first time, formally confirmed that he was in fact a United States intelligence asset.
This episode had a featurette, and so I was able to listen to the little behind the scenes featurette for this one.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Paul McCusker initially intended to set this in London. This apparently was taken from some news item he had read about somebody in the government leaving his laptop in his car on a bathroom break and then it getting stolen. And that the person who stole it probably didn't know that he had a laptop full of top secret information.
Sure.
And so McCusker ran with that. He originally was going to set it in London, and they were going to encounter Special Agent Duffield, and he was going to be Reginald Duffield's son.
Oh, no. Interesting.
Which is an idea that I think remains unexplored to this day. I don't think we've ever seen another Duffield.
Well, you can't get enough of that wonderful Duff.
If only Nate Lamagna were here to appreciate that right now.
I miss him. I miss him every day.
They decided that it would be too hard to get actors who could do British accents. So
they've had trouble with that in the past.
They've had such flawless accents up until this point.
I like that we're on the opposite sides of that. I'm like, you got to do better. And you're like, no, make it worse.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of sad it wasn't set in London because I think, spoilers, Regis Blackgaard's back.
Yeah.
There he is. Josh, what is the fetishization of the Midwest within evangelical circles? Or why do you think Odyssey focuses so much about the purity of the heartland?
I think there's a couple reasons. First of all, that's where the freaks settled. That's probably the biggest thing.
Who didn't veer too far, right? They weren't the Mormon freaks. They were still Christian freaks.
Right, the evangelicals. And I've talked about this a little bit in past episodes, but my family, for instance, and I was just showing Brian my fucking family tree the other day. Yeah. every single person in my family tree came over from the Netherlands and immediately settled in the Great Lakes Basin, either in West Michigan or Chicago. And so people who have similarities in terms of their worldview and characteristics, they tend to group up together. And so then you sort of get this mythology that is created, right? Because obviously what you do first is you ignore the fact that there were people there already. And instead you create this mythology where we were the ones who just sort of like came in and discovered it first and immediately created, you know, a better, holier world. The other thing that I think is a factor is that there are a lot of religious schools in the Midwest. And in Chicago specifically, Moody Bible College.
Moody spelled M-O-O-D-Y?
Yeah. Evangelicals run the Midwest, and that's why you get that.
And I just want to put in, I did not do any of the research on the term heartland, but it does have a very interesting history. And I would redirect our listeners to episode 130 of Citations Needed if they want to hear the history of the term heartland, which was a term that originally referred to places in Central Europe that were the agricultural centers of the continent. And then in the 1960s, that word was then rejiggered to apply to the American white Christian Midwest.
That recently?
Yes.
That's
recently. It was done by newspaper columnists and PR men.
Oh, sure.
I'm just looking at the size of this airport. I've been to the one in Los Angeles, but this...
Well, O'Hare is one of the biggest airports in the world.
I can believe that.
All the biggest airlines fly here. The terminal covers miles. It's so big, the baggage claim is in a different time zone.
You're kidding.
Yeah, I'm kidding.
Whit.
Why is she here with her employer?
She is 16 years old.
She is a 16-year-old.
You know, we talked about how they have some sort of show Bible where they say like she ages like 1 year for every 2.5 years. That is not true early on. She does not graduate. This is 1991 still.
Sure.
She does not graduate high school until 1998.
Well, her age...
So she is still 16.
It really does feel all over the place because for a lot of this episode, she's actually like a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this airport is so big. And it's like, you're 16 years old. You've seen big airports
It's weird,
before.
right? Like, and I will admit, like, O'Hare is an impressive airport, even by the standards of other airports. Like,
it's got that colorful tunnel.
But if you've been to any hub, whether you've been to Atlanta, LAX, JFK, you know, any of those big hubs, you know what the deal is.
I only go to good Christian airports like Gerald R. Ford and Dallas Love Field.
Well, I mean, also, if you grew up in the 90s, you know how big O'Hare is because you watched Catherine O'Hara sprint through it in a mad dash to get on a plane.
So then as they're making their way out of the airport, they're going to go to the world famous Excelsior Hotel, which is now in Chicago. That's fine.
And Whit gets profiled.
Some of you may be young. You may not remember the pre-9/11 days of flying. Things are a lot more lax, and not just at LAX, but at all the airports. I mean, this doesn't happen today. Someone does not get like stopped by security on the way out of an airport.
Way out. Yeah,
today.
It's always on the way in.
And it certainly never happened then. So here's a highly unusual moment where Whit gets stopped by the police and Connie gets real
That's
fresh.
who you are.
Would you turn it on so I can see something on the screen, please?
Sure.
Hey, what are you checking for? Bombs? Drugs? Bootleg tapes of the Praise Kids in concert?
Connie just says the word bomb. That's what you could do in the 90s. It was quite a rip-roll in time.
Who are the Praise Kids? That was a question I had.
I mean, the Praise Kids is just the name that they're using for any, like, the industry at this time of getting, like, children's choirs singing praise music. It was big time stuff.
Oh, the business was booming.
And to think Whit having MP3s of it, that would have been very unusual. But so Whit has this laptop, a 1991 laptop.
Right.
And
it's probably like a power book.
He says it's both AC and DC.
Well, thank God.
The guard tells him to open it up and look at it because who knows? They're not saying why. It's fine, though. Whit closes it back up. Connie doesn't get arrested for saying the word bomb.
It really is worth noting, though, at this point, like, just how new laptops were.
Yeah.
The first PowerBook, the first Apple PowerBook was the PowerBook 100, and it was released in October of 1991. This is brand new technology.
And this probably is a power book. I mean,
probably.
Again, this is the guy who never fucking watches TV.
Yeah, who has cutting edge technology.
He has
in his
every
bag.
computer that he can get so that he can bootleg the Praise Kids Inquirer.
The other thing that we should note here as well is that the whole reason that Whit is in town is that there's a big meeting for the encyclopedia company that he owns. And you remember this, United Press.
I'm having an encyclopedia meeting.
This is Whit's U.S. intelligence front / encyclopedia publisher.
Yeah, it's never been clear to me that he's part of like a secret organization.
And for some reason, he's taken Connie along. But like Connie doesn't have anything to do with the encyclopedia thing. They're just going to go see sights. There's no reason for Connie, the 16-year-old girl, to be on this trip with him.
Yeah, what does she do while he's in his meetings? Does she just have to sit in the hotel room and stare out the window?
I mean,
does she have to
do
wait
her
for that
hair,
window?
put on makeup?
I mean, the hotel's in the Loop, so like, she could probably walk around. She can go up to Steppenwolf.
There you go.
And see John Malkovich.
See John Malkovich and Gary Sinise. Yeah. Doing a fucking
You know
Mammoth
what
play.
16-year-old girls love is Gary Sinise.
And David Mamet.
Can't get enough of
At
them.
this point, then, Connie and Whit hop into a shuttle van, which is going to take them to the hotel. And there's this third guy who's in the van, Gregory Kelly.
He's voiced by the young man who did the voice of Jack Davis. If you remember Jack Davis from the War of 1812 episode, his voice has
I
changed.
fully blocked it from my mind, yes.
His voice has changed, and now he sounds like Wart in The Sword and the Stone.
Guy in the van, he's acting sus, and he actually
Very sus. Yeah.
Like aggressively sus.
ends up getting out of the van early. And he gets out of the van right after the driver lets them all know that there was this big thing going on, and then there was, for some reason, the driver knows all of this shit, that there was a laptop that
How
got
the
stolen.
fuck does he know all this shit?
From the fucking United States Department of Defense. This driver, for some reason, knows.
I like
that
to
the
think Greg
laptop-
Kelly got into the shuttle while trying to lay low, and then he told the driver everything.
Right.
So the government lost this laptop, and they're all looking for this laptop, and I think I may have that laptop, and hitherto may not know.
Very Greg from Succession move.
Yes,
absolutely.
cousin Greg Kelly.
So then after they get to the hotel, Whit's on another one-sided phone call, classic. They're going to be doing some sightseeing that afternoon, and then
You're going to go to the Sears
Tower,
Willis
baby.
Tower.
It's still called everybody knows that it's still called the Sears Tower. It's the Sears Tower.
Yeah.
Then on TV, which is playing in the background, we learn that there's the suspect, the guy who may or may not have stolen this laptop from DOD, is the very same guy in the van.
And that suspect, Greg Kelly, had no idea of what he was stealing.
There he is! There he is! See the picture?
I see.
Been convicted of petty theft on 2 previous occasions. Authorities are asking Greg Kelly or anyone who has seen him to call one of the numbers on top of the screen immediately. Because of the top secret nature of the missing laptop computer, authorities fear Kelly's life may be in danger.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Then we meet... Oh, who could this be?
Don't just sit there. Say something.
Cats are amazing creatures.
Who is this?
Who is this guy?
Who could this be?
Possibly be.
Who is he?
And yet when they're angry.
So yeah,
That's
Greg is working for this guy. This guy. Who's this guy? Who is this guy? Who's this guy?
It's
Who is this
Ryan,
guy? He hasn't
Ryan,
said.
it's Regis Blackgaard. It's Dr. Regis Blackgaard.
What?
Oh my
What?
God.
What? What? No, they have not said his name is Regis Blackgaard yet. I don't believe it. So then, Regis's stooge shows up, a man named Pinky, and we're going to talk about him a little bit.
Oh, do we have to?
Pinky, is it the right machine?
No, it's just a regular laptop.
But it's the one I got out of the car. I swear.
Are you sure it's the wrong one, Pinky?
Yes, the owner's name is engraved on the bottom. I've checked all the files on the hard disk. Boring, academic material, no military secrets.
Interesting.
He starts as I don't want to say Russian, maybe Georgian.
Sorta.
It's a little
Perfect
Strangers. Then he
Vaguely
turns
Caucasian, yeah.
Well, he turns Israeli by the end of it.
Well, there's also
There's a Schwarzenegger thing.
I was going to
too in
say,
there.
to be very clear,
the Schwarzenegger thing becomes more pronounced when he's a clown. Yeah.
Pinky would end up going on to become governor of the state of California.
Yes, that's true.
So then
He was
we
my
find
governor
out,
for a long time, friends.
We find out somehow this whole scheme is way more complicated than it needs to be. Because Pinky was actually the government agent that got robbed, but he's not a government agent. He was
Right.
just pretending to be or not an agent, a courier.
Right.
And he had already stolen it for Blackgaard. And then Greg Kelly somehow stole the laptop from him. And then,
but he's also working for Blackgaard.
Got it to Blackgaard. But then you find out, oh no, the laptop bags got switched. Right. And Greg has the wrong laptop.
Oh, Sasha. It was all going to be so easy, wasn't it? Disguise Pinky as the courier, have him pick up the computer and bring it directly back here. Only he makes a pit stop and Kelly steals the computer from him. And then he grabs the wrong one out of a hotel cab. Goo. Sounds like a Marx Brothers movie.
I just wanted to say here, this is a masterclass in how you write exposition. It's natural. It flows. You don't even notice.
I mean, to be fair, it is hard to notice with that soothing voice. The detail that I'd missed before, and perhaps even in the previous episode, is that his cat is named Sasha.
Yeah.
That's a great name for a cat.
Well, and that's the thing is you have Earl Bowen at least, and he can say lines like bunglers. I'm surrounded by bunglers and make it work.
Like he makes it work so much.
He really does. So here's, I guess, the big question. Blackgaard has his hands. He's kind of like the Moriarty, right, of the series. He is the Napoleon of crime. He has his hands in like every little underhanded scheme happening in the city of Chicago.
And I'm sorry, Blackgaard? What? Who?
Who is this stranger and why does his laugh sound so familiar?
I don't think it's Blackgaard because Chris said he's a stranger.
It could be.
That is true. It is a mysterious stranger. Yeah. She also said at the beginning of the episode. She also said, "If you're like me, you love surprises," which is the scariest sentence I've ever heard in my life.
How does it make you feel when Chris says AJ?
It makes me feel like she's being held at gunpoint to say it. I've never heard Chris say an where I'm like, that was organic. That was a great take. One and done.
It's like he's trying to do both North by Northwest and What's Up, Doc.
Yeah.
And it's just
the real thing to take away, obviously, from all of this is that Blackgaard has Whit's laptop. That's all we really need to know.
Well, and also cousin Greg is killed,
and Whit has the government.
Yeah, that's right. They fucking kill him.
They fucking fridge cousin Greg.
I think he's dead. I'm pretty certain he's just dead.
They very strongly imply it. They're like, we'll take care of him.
Yeah,
and it's like, but like the cops aren't going to find me, right? And it's just like, the police will never find you. The cops aren't going to
ascertain
my whereabouts.
So then Whit and Connie are now being detained by the police because they called the tip line. And so they're now down at the station, but they're being interviewed by a special agent, which I think means FBI, like a Fed.
Special Agent Phillips.
They were about to go free, but then Whit needed another background check because he has Q clearance. And Connie's like, why does he have special clearance?
Normally you would have been out of here by now, but your position, Mr. Whittaker, required an additional security check.
You had to double check Whit? Why?
Mr. Whittaker knows the answer to that, I think.
Remember applesauce, Connie?
The computer program? How could I forget it? Made Whit's end go crazy. You made that for the Department of Defense?
Among others.
She knows about applesauce?
Well, nothing that wouldn't breach security.
But you destroyed applesauce.
Well, it's not the only program I've worked on, Connie.
Once an agent, always an agent, eh, Whittaker?
An agent?
You can't just say that.
Very long time ago.
Among others?
Whit has made a program called Applesauce, and if we remember what Applesauce did, the first part of it is running diagnostics on Whit's End, and the second part is a top secret Department of Defense program. Yep, it's like, I have to check to see if all the blenders work at once, and then horrible things that we cannot talk about. Why is it doing both of these things at once?
I tried to toast bread, and I accidentally declared war in Iran.
Anyway, at this point, they get pressed, or Whit gets pressed by his agent. Like, who do you work for, right? And Whit remains steadfast in his denial. Like, he's like, no, I'm just here for, my gig with the encyclopedia company. And eventually they're free to go. And actually, Agent Phillips then drives them to the Sears Tower, which is interesting because they never mentioned that they were going to the Sears Tower. How did he know?
How would he know?
Because he had bugged the room.
I love that Agent Phillips is also like, I am convinced you are a spy. You're free to to go. I'll give you a ride.
But this makes sense when we know what Phillips's angle is.
We sure do.
I guess.
Yes.
I don't know. No, it probably doesn't make sense
really,
if you think about it, but I'm not gonna.
So they get back to the hotel. Whit tells Connie not to talk about his past. At all. Like, this is strictly between us, Connie. Need to know information.
Whit's suite has been burgled.
Right.
Or at least broken into, but like not very well burgled.
It was bungled.
The laptop is
you might
still,
say.
surrounded by burglars and bunglers.
Bunglers.
Bunglers and burglars is
nothing but bunglers.
D&D ripoff.
Yeah, they don't steal the laptop. They don't manage to get. He has 2 bags on him, and they don't manage to get one of them.
Nope.
And
they steal the other one.
The manager of the hotel has then taken the stuff, including the laptop, and put it into the hotel safe, like in the main office for safekeeping.
And then Connie gets kidnapped.
Right. By Pinky.
Right. We also learn in the scene where Whit gets bungled and burgled that he and Connie do have separate rooms, and I can't tell you what a sigh of relief I breathed when I found out.
But neighboring.
Do they have the little door?
Probably. They probably have the door.
They probably have the door.
They've got to have the door, right?
Do you think that Whit puts a glass against the wall just to hear Connie pray?
Yes.
Because I think that's what he's doing.
Oh, Connie.
Whit has so much money, and this is something that
he
I
has
wanted
money
to,
that's like not his that he has access to.
He has
right?
capital,
like
and
Jeffrey Epstein.
Exactly, and this is something that this episode makes very, very clear that Whit is not just wealthy; he's also connected.
There's this huge, like, sort of contradictory thing about him, right? Because he says at one point, why would somebody burgle me? I don't have anything anyone would want to steal. And it's like, he is simultaneously this rich...
You have a laptop in 1991.
Yeah, he's like this rich, like, land-owning gentry class who's also just like, I'm just a simple country folk. And it's like, no, you're not. You work for the DOD.
Which
like, you're a weapons manufacturer.
Speaks very well to the evangelical identity too.
Right.
Like, oh, I'm just a simple little country boy.
The base model.
I don't know what that was. That was like a Pinky thing.
Hello,
it just
I'm
changed halfway through.
just a little country boy.
Just a boy.
I'm so tiny. Somebody pick me up and put me in a pocket.
God damn it. Just to be very clear about this, I wanted to let you guys know. Again, the PowerBook 100, the first mass market laptop, was created by Apple and released to consumers in October of 1991 for the retail price of $2,500 United States dollars.
That's a lot of money.
That's for the base model, and that is real goddamn money.
That's like $5,000 in today's money.
Yeah, like $4,800. So it had a 9-inch monochrome LCD panel.
Okay.
You could have 2 megabytes of random access memory. Sure. Which could be expandable up to 8, a whopping 8 megs of RAM.
Oh, tell me more about that RAM.
Ran a Motorola 68,000 processor, came with a 20 megabyte hard drive, 5.1 pounds.
Oh, that's too big for me, the tiniest country boy.
Damn it.
I could never even lift up the lid. I'm so tiny, but I could jump on the keys one at a time. Oh, look at me go, writing a whole novel with my feet.
This is the new guy.
This is the newest guy. He's the smallest little guy. Did you know Ulysses was originally smuggled into the United States over the Great Lakes? It first appeared in Chicago. I wouldn't know, though. That book is too big for me. The tiniest country boy.
So this episode of Adventures in Odyssey then wraps up with...
I love that you can bring in the James Joyce facts.
It's very nice.
That's all I got.
Pinky takes Connie down to the parking garage of the hotel. She's like, well, I know John Avery Whittaker. And of course, this guy comes out and, what a coincidence.
She's like, you're Regis Blackgaard. And then I was like, wow.
Yeah,
so
and so was Chris.
That was.
So was Chris. Chris was like floored.
Yeah.
Astounded. I love that Pinky says, nobody wants to hurt you. Unlike that guy I killed earlier. He wouldn't stop talking about his whereabouts.
We're in episode 2. Whit gets a call. He's hanging out with the lobbyman. Connie's like, you need to go to North University. And then she hangs up. She's a hostage.
Chicago college North University,
Yes.
but the South Campus of North
The
University.
South Campus of North University. I'm like, you couldn't have just like phrased that a little bit better when you're making something up.
Yeah.
You go to the southeast of Northwestern on the western side of the northern.
It's actually called South Park, and I was briefly like, we're going to South
Going
Park?
on down to South Park and have myself a time. One thing that I thought was interesting about this episode is that Chicago, like I said, is used, I think, because it is a stand-in for a big cosmopolitan city in the Midwestern cultural imagination.
Right.
But this episode is completely lacking in any type of specificity whatsoever, with the exception of talking about the fact that they're at ORD at the beginning of the episode.
Connie's now being held at Blackgaard's warehouse.
What do you think of my new operation? My warehouse. Every conceivable electronic device for every conceivable need. I'm opening a chain of stores.
You're kidding.
I was even thinking of opening one in Odyssey.
I didn't even piece that together. Oh my God. Electric Palace is a Blackgaard thing?
What? What?
What?
What?
No, don't worry about it. We'll get to that in the fourth episode.
What?
Wait.
What?
Oh
So
my God.
he's
God
got
damn
every
it.
conceivable electronic for every conceivable need. I don't think we're going to hear that phrase again.
Yes.
And so he's running a distribution center here in the middle of Chicago that's going to serve the rest of the country and be a direct competitor to Radio Shack.
Not the middle of Chicago. They are in the famous East Side Warehouse District of Chicago.
Right, that's where they filmed Dark Knight.
They're not in Pilsen. They're not in the back of the yards. They're not in anywhere that you might have heard of.
Blackgaard gives Connie the rundown on like why he's not in prison.
Right.
Well, then why didn't you stick around to defend yourself? You just disappeared.
I had urgent business elsewhere and left the managing of my property to Mr. Glossman.
More like
Is that a
Grossman.
crime?
More like
that, yes.
But Woo! You have more loopholes than a spaghetti strainer.
Got him.
Wait.
This is that Odyssean humor.
I love that moment because I think it's one of the few moments where they acknowledge how terrible the jokes are.
Yeah.
Richard Maxwell has been tried and convicted, and he's in prison.
Yes.
We assume. And he testified that he did all of this as a lackey for Regis Blackgaard. And apparently that just was like water off a duck's back.
Right.
And he talked about all his little loopholes that he did. I don't think there's a very thorough understanding of the legal system here, but whatever. No. Blackgaard's free. He's out and about. He's hanging out in Chicago, and he's inventing Radio Shack when Radio Shack already exists.
Richard Maxwell, for those of you who had not listened to the episode about Richard,
he had a silver hammer.
Served as what?
Bang, bang, Maxwell Silver Hammer, aka the greatest Beatles song ever written.
Okay, so
bang, bang, bang goes the Maxwell.
Dang, clang, clang went the Richard.
I'm going to kill myself.
Hold on, Josh, would it help if I brought the Tiny Countryman back?
Every day, the two of you drive me closer and closer to self-harm.
Do you want
It's
me
okay,
to...
because we're doing the same thing to AJ. I'm perfectly fine and well-adjusted, apparently.
Right, exactly. Our mental health is better than it's ever been.
I'm just already so far deep that I
Josh,
can't
would
get
it
any worse.
help if I brought back the tiniest
It
countryman?
would not. So Richard Maxwell was a guy who did a couple things. One thing that he did was he ran a grade fixing scheme at Campbell County Community College.
Honestly, the worst of his crimes.
And then the other big thing that he did was he committed arson.
Twice. But one was good arson.
To Tom Riley's barn and entire, basically, like he has a whole fucking homestead that he largely burned to the ground, including a lot of the orchard. The other arson that he committed was Blackgaard's Castle, which of course was Regis Blackgaard's competitor to Wit's End, basically. Yeah. But it was an arcade.
A degenerate video arcade.
Arcade. At this point, then there's a lot of plot that happens, and I don't think it's worth talking about this at length.
Like Whit does this, like he goes to the campus to do a drop off, and then they do like a classic Hitchcock kind of scene where a clown approaches him, and then a parade passes by, and for some reason they had positioned themselves on the other side of the parade.
Why did they do it right there in the parade? Just wait an hour.
But they were like taken by surprise by the parade. It's like you saw people lining up.
Out all over
you should
Chicago.
have gotten to the other side, and then just like, oh, we can't see him. He's behind the Shriners and their tiny cars. Damn you, Freemasons!
And you know what? It's really good they have those tiny cars because that's what's usually driven by the tiny country boys. They can all fit in one.
Yeah.
Whit has put himself on the line. If the operation's a failure, Whit's going to Gitmo.
Yeah, so the parade passes by, and unlike Dolly, they miss it. Obviously, like if you've seen these kinds of movies, you know the clown is actually important here, right?
Of
so
course.
no one dresses up like a clown in Chicago of all places unless they're up to no good.
Oh my God.
He like walks up to him right at the beginning and nothing happens. Whatever.
Right.
So the parade has passed. Whit is gone. Then Whit awakens from his unconsciousness in the sewers of Chicago.
Yeah.
With Richard Maxwell hovering over him. Was like, oh yeah, I just pulled open the manhole and sucked you in.
I guess he got like knocked
and
the
then
fuck
I hit
out.
you a bunch, but I'm actually a good guy now. Yeah.
Just
so Richard,
call him on the phone.
so Richard Maxwell, apparently 2 years have passed.
Yes.
But Connie's still 16, and Richard is out on good behavior, and now he starts behaving badly because he's going to take down Regis Blackgaard entirely on his own. He's not working with any agency or anything like that. He's just been stalking Regis in Chicago and trying to find a way to destroy him, and now Whit has dropped in.
This plot line felt very 24 to me.
Blackgaard starts talking to Connie about all these other loopholes for why he hasn't technically kidnapped her. And again, this would not hold up in court.
No.
I could see it like working as a manipulation in the moment where he can convince a 16-year-old girl that like nothing will happen to him. But then like he's gonna get arrested, but apparently not.
So here's a big question for me. Does a spaghetti strainer have loopholes or does it just have holes?
Just holes.
Yeah, they're not loops. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes absolutely no
doesn't make sense at all.
It's why that phrase really sat hard on my brain.
Whit has arranged this whole like meeting with Blackgaard now. They find him at his warehouse as he's menacing Connie. Richard, of course, is also there. Right. And then...
You may as well give up, Blackgaard.
Give up? Oh, please. Because the two of you have me surrounded. What are you going to do? Frighten me with rude expressions?
Funny? You're a very funny man.
You see?
But I can do better than that. Like with this gun.
Richard!
So Richard pulls out a gun. He has a gun.
He says, it took me 2 years to think of this. I'm like, it took you 2 years to think of a gun?
And what happens next is, again, very 24. Like, he forces Blackgaard to get down on his knees.
You're right, I'm on my knees. Now, what do you want?
I want you to beg for your life.
What?
Richard!
Beg!
Don't hurt me, Richard. Please.
You can do better than that.
Please don't hurt me. I'll do anything you want, but please don't hurt me.
Say you're sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to spend 2 years in the detention center. I'll make it up to you. Somehow. Please don't hurt me. Please. Just put the gun away. Whatever you want, please.
Is this what you wanted, Richard? Is this the revenge? How does it taste, huh?
Delicious.
Was it worth 2 years?
Get out of the way.
Don't you understand? When you go out for revenge, you've got to dig 2 graves. One for the person you're after and one for yourself.
You're in the line of fire.
That's right. And this is where I'll stay until you put the gun away. Richard, there's no such thing as revenge. Not really. It never replaces what you lost. It never restores. It doesn't even satisfy.
Whit is actually willing to make a sacrifice here. This is like the only time you see Whit actually putting something on the line, and he is now standing between Richard Maxwell and Regis Blackgaard to keep Maxwell from killing Blackgaard. More for Maxwell's sake than for Blackgaard's sake.
Right, absolutely. It's Batman or the Joker scenario.
To me, this is the only scene in this entire two-parter that has any real dramatic heft to it, and I'm curious to hear how you guys felt about it.
Honestly, the thing I like most about the scene is that Richard doubles down on being like, I'm gonna fucking kill this guy.
Yeah.
And the stakes seem, at least at this point, really, really high. He's just like, this man ruined my life. I'm going to enact my revenge. And I was like, ooh, actual steaks.
Right.
This is tasty. Put a little A1 sauce on those steaks. But it turns out, nope.
Yeah, it's just a squirt
It's
gun.
a water gun.
It's a fucking water gun.
You know, Richard Maxwell got to live out a very sadistic fantasy.
Power fantasy,
Yeah, hell yeah.
And I think it gets the meaning across. I think Whit expresses it well enough, like the idea that revenge doesn't ever bring back whatever was wronged, but neither does sending people to prison, it turns out. Then, so our special agent Mr. Phillips
Yeah.
shows up, and then it's like, oh, I'm working for Blackgaard. Anyway, fuck you. And he takes the laptop and says,
Arrivederci, amigos.
And we find out that Whit actually did like a double reverse swap.
Yeah.
And the computer he had on him was rigged to self-destruct.
Erase everything,
And also there's an MP3 on there.
So he and Richard post this little goofy like, fuck you.
Is it a video or is it an audio file?
It might have been I would assume an audio file, but with like a 3-frame GIF of like Whit and or Richard being goofy, because I feel like that's what movies used to do in the 90s. Whenever something got hacked, you'd see like a little Jack in the Box.
You didn't say the Magic
That's true. Because I was just like, how long did they record themselves laughing? so the laptop gets erased, and then Chris comes on in what is the most abrupt gear shift I think in Odyssey history.
She's like,
here's a Bible verse.
Here's all 13 things that God hates, according to the Apostle Paul. And it's like, why didn't you do a verse about revenge?
Right.
We actually had a revenge thing here, but then they're like, here's why the Bible says there's bad guys.
Yeah, I sometimes think that the Chris stuff is written. It feels like it's written by a separate department that they just don't talk to each other.
But they all talk to each other. Yeah. Everybody cycles through this whole thing. Everyone directs and writes and whatever. It doesn't make any sense why this happens the way that it happens.
Connie actively solicits ideas from all the children listening in.
I mean, Chris.
God damn it. I wrote it down wrong.
All women are the same to you, huh?
Oh, boy.
Well, they are to me, the little tiny country boy. I have to really re-examine.
I can't see any of their faces.
I'm so tiny.
Might be a tiny boy, but his bias is huge. Like you were saying, a better Bible verse for this, if you wanted to go down that road, would be something that is actually about revenge. And I got a nice little verse here. Romans 12:19. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord.
Boom. That's it. That's the verse.
Do you agree with Whit, fundamentally, that like there cannot ever be a place for revenge, or that the attempt for vengeance in any way, shape, or form is always going to be a futile effort?
Josh, I don't know if you know this, but the people that you're avenging on, they have families. And those families will then come after you for revenge.
This will connect too with like the second half as well. It's like the idea of vengeance, or like what is a proper reparation for a heinous act look like, is like the foundation on which we build our societies, right? One of the only preserved tragedies of ancient Athens, and the only preserved trilogy is the Oresteia, right? Which is all about that thing. Like Agamemnon sacrifices Clytemnestra's daughter. It's his daughter too, but you know, Clytemnestra then butchers him, and then Orestes takes vengeance out on her. And the question that arises by the time you get to the Eumenides is, which act of vengeance was the justified one? Is Orestes at the end of the day the correct one? And what they do is the Furies become a jury of his winged peers, and Athena says,
they put some wings on him.
This is and that is the myth of the foundation of Athens, is like, this is where we've decided what a just action is, right? The Greeks didn't have a concept of sin at this time like the Jews had. They had a concept of pollution, societal pollution.
Interesting.
And so then how do you right that societal pollution? So you see that too with Oedipus. Oedipus technically did nothing wrong, but he created pollution, and that had to be resolved in some way. Yeah. Because Oedipus, by killing his father, did so just killing a man in self-defense, not knowing who he was, and then marrying his mother, again, married a woman he didn't know who turned out to be his mother. But that still creates that pollution. And a lot of building, I think, like liberalism is, where do we apportion that? Like in a much more modern setting, who takes care of the act of vengeance? Because that's, I mean, the idea of justice is like, how do you even separate that from vengeance, right? You're still punishing, you're still fining and imprisoning people, for carrying out something bad. It's not the Hammurabi Code. It's not, like you cut off a hand of a thief or something very specific. It's like you lock someone away for a certain amount of years. And that's what's interesting to me is like Odyssey is really leaning hard on the idea that prison actually rehabilitates people.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
This is correct. He has been locked away, but in a way that has made him a better person, as opposed to revenge, which simply brings violence against somebody else.
Yeah.
And so their concept of it is that the prison is not actually violent. The state is not violent in this incident.
The perspective I think that's implicit to this episode is that it is wrong for private individuals to exert force to remedy wrongdoing, but that the force of the state is not only an appropriate corrective, but the necessary corrective.
And Whit's case to Richard specifically is correct, right? If Richard kills Regis Blackgaard,
he's going back
Regis
to jail.
Blackgaard has exploited the system and he should already be in prison or whatever. But because that hasn't happened, if he just kills Regis, he's going to ruin his life. One, he's going to have the psychological weight of having killed another human being on his head.
Of course.
And he's going to be back in prison. He will not be able to improve his life. While now that he's free, he can do that. And we'll see him try to work on that.
A question that this show never seems to ask. It's very fine with having watchmen, and it never asks who watches the watchmen.
Yeah.
It's just the watchmen are always good because they serve the greater good of society.
Except for this one special agent.
Except for this one special agent who was on the take.
But this goes back also to, again, like suppositions. There's this idea that, and I don't remember the exact verse off the top of my head, but it's the thing of like any authority that is put in place is put there by God. Therefore, you must respect said authority. That's a baseline assumption. That is part of...
That verse actually comes up in the episode where Connie graduates from high school, actually.
Oh, interesting.
Well, and, this concept of justice and like what is justice and where does the cycle end is also the center of Friedrich Dürrenmatt's Play the Visit, which we will do an episode at some point because I'm going to make you guys do it. But,
absolutely.
The Visit centers around this really heinous act carried out by the main character that led to the death of a child and the expulsion of a young woman from a community.
Right.
She, in turn, says she will restore this entire town back to its former glory with lots and lots of money that she's made through her many husbands.
Billions.
And all they have to do is kill that guy.
Right.
And they say they won't do it. And eventually they do it. But and they do make the town a better place. That's what's interesting.
Yeah.
But like the teacher says to Il, there will always be an old woman for each of us, right? Il's wife, for instance, she leaves town when they go to kill him, and she could come back and turn it around on them. And what is required for a society to improve and continue moving forward is at some point you say, we just have to bury something. And this is true across like all of history. There's something where you just say, okay, no, we just have to stop and take another step this way, regardless of whether it's right in the individual or abstract sense. This episode does not engage with this at all that deep of a way, but it is an interesting thing that starts to come up, and it's something that we will keep in mind as we discuss the concept of forgiveness.
Odyssey is a show that will present a gun, a complex issue that you think they're going to grapple with, and then it turns out you're squirted in the face.
Yeah. Just like we're sucking that penis in Romania.
Sucking that Romanian penis.
There we go.
Guten hello, listeners. This is Pinky, America's favorite ex-stooge. Do you like cake? Do you like cream puffs that are to die for? Do you get cookies from big chain stores who don't understand your cookie needs? Well, put the cookie down, now! And come on down to Pinky's Patisserie, located off the I-90 between the burnt-down IHOP and that store that sells haunted lamps. The lights won't stop flickering! Pinky's Patisserie crafts cakes that always delight and surprise, all of them based on my own life experience. Try our signature Garrett cake, made with real piano wire. Or why not try our Swiss rolls, made with a real Swiss rolled inside? Or how about a donut? The donut is filled with knives. So come on down to Pinky's Patisserie so I can forget about the last job I did before I retired, when I went on a road trip with my new friend Greg and found out that Greg was also very much into baking. And we talked about Gunther, that's my stepfather Gunther, and how he taught me everything he knows about baking. And Greg said that maybe I should follow my passions instead of just doing the thing that pays the most, you know? And I felt seen in a way that I hadn't really ever felt seen before. And when I later had my hands around his neck, I didn't feel the satisfaction of a job well done. I just felt nothing. One of the last things Greg said before he died was that he hoped I would open that shop someday and that he forgave me. But what if I can't forgive me? What if Pinky can't forgive Pinky? So say hasta la vista, baby, to those sweet cravings, and say I'll be back to me, Pinky. As you are leaving Pinky's Patisserie with a cake in the shape of my friend Greg's lifeless eyeballs. Pinky's Patisserie, if you think you know us, you do not.
So welcome back, everybody. Because we are speaking so much on revenge, I invite you all to attend the tale of Riley T, the only farmer in Odyssey.
I don't think
his horses drew him great acclaim until they were almost consumed in the flames of Maxwell are the demon arson of Odyssey. Swing your matches wide, Maxwell.
Oh, God. So, did you do the whole thing?
No, that's all.
Did you do the entire musical?
That's all I have.
You know, we've titled this episode of our podcast Richard Dichard Redemption.
Yeah.
And
baby.
That's because the next couple episodes are actually going to deal with the aftermath of noted arsonist pedophile Richard Maxwell.
And his dealings with Dutch Vanderland.
That's right. I have a plan, Richard. I have a plan.
Jesus Christ. So we open the episode with Officer Irishman, whose name I did not
forgot
quote.
Officer Orion came back. But,
Officer Orion, dude.
There he is. There's
Again,
Officer Orion.
This is Will Ryan doing a voice. This officer is a little goofy.
Is a little goofy sort of like the tiny man?
Well, he's just a silly, goofy kind of move.
He's just a little goofy. A hook.
So Chris is wondering what exactly is going on because Officer Orion is taking in Maxwell at the precinct in Odyssey. And Tom Riley has swung by Whit's End. And he's heard a few things because Tom is always talking to people in the town. He's heard that Blackgaard's Castle, the lot that formerly held Blackgaard's Castle, is getting cleared. The whole building is being demolished. And also he has seen, he saw on a bus on the way in, because I guess Tom is just like looking at buses as they drive by and seeing who's in them.
He's always looking to see if Whit or his friend whose wife left him for a horse are driving past.
Yeah, he's been trying to hail a bus for years, and every time was just like, we don't stop for him.
And Richard's in town, and Tom doesn't trust Richard, nor should he, because again, it bears repeating, Richard Maxwell burned down most of his property.
And almost killed him and his horses.
Like, he
Except
almost...
for the one who was missing.
Had it not been for John Avery Whittaker, he would have fucking died. And so, I get it, right? Additionally, Eugene, not thrilled that Richard is back due to the fact that Richard Maxwell created this grade fixing scheme.
Yeah, they spent a lot of this episode rehashing precisely what it was that he did in all of these episodes. Like the first third is really just telling us where he'd been.
Which is fair because, Odyssey is episodic. It's not technically serialized. So
years had passed at this point. Yeah.
And finally, the third person that Richard owes an apology to, of course, is Lucy Cunningham Schultz, who he also almost killed by directing a surge of electricity to the Imagination Station while Lucy was inside of it. And also, again, just to be very clear, Richard Maxwell is a pedophile.
Right.
He was grooming that kid. And it is very clear when he sees her and says, "Oh, you've grown up."
Yep. I wrote the note, get that man away from that child. They put Lucy into some really weird situations in this episode.
The whole gang heads over to Whit's End, and Whit immediately fucks off, just leaves all of them alone together.
Arrivederci, amigos.
He walks outside, he hails a bus.
The guy's like, no, I was almost home this time.
And it doesn't go well, you know? They're not happy to see Richard, and why should they be?
We see Richard over at Blackgaard's castle as they're prepping it for demolition.
Right.
Well. Hey, excuse me.
Yeah, what do you want?
What's going on here?
What's it look like? We're sewing dresses? Tearing down this burned out building?
So glad you got this clip.
Castle.
I have a note here, AJ.
Yeah.
I want to ask you specifically your thoughts about this random guy who is here on the demolition site, just kind of like saying stuff.
Can I be honest and say that in my head, when I heard the scene, I imagined that all around them construction was happening, but it was just a bunch of guys sewing dresses. So when he asked, what do we look like, sewing dresses? Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. Well, good, because that's what we're doing.
That's actually a joke in the musical Skyscraper, which was produced once on Broadway and then never done again, not even by a community theater or high school anywhere in the last 50-some years. But there's a song where the construction workers, who are, of course, taking such long breaks because of the union, use their breaks to like moonlight in other things, and they get into haute couture.
Well, because God forbid that anybody, have something that they're passionate about that they're able to do when they are not exchanging their labor for surplus value.
So they have a kind of fun song in the second act called Haute Couture where they all talk about the dresses they're designing.
Is this a bad musical or is it a good musical?
As someone who almost did the first production of it in exactly 50 years since the original, it's a bad musical.
If we reach 200 patrons, we will put on a production of Skyscraper.
It's from Peter Stone, who the next year did the libretto for 1776, which is one of the greatest musicals ever written.
Love 1776.
Fucking rules. I want our listeners to understand, just because I hate America, I do not hate 1776, the excellent musical.
It's a very good musical about the inherent contradictions that are at the heart of this country's founding. It's a musical about authoritarianism. It's a little bit on the nose at times because it is a product of its time.
Right.
But it's good.
So here are the guys in the cast of Skyscraper getting ready to tear down Blackgaard's castle. And Whit shows up.
Basically, Richard and Whit get to talking. Richard wants to do an apology tour. His initial encounters have not gone well. So he then says, look, can you help me out? Whit says, well, you should probably apologize to God first.
And I do like the respect that they have for their characters at this point in time. Richard doesn't have that moment.
Right.
He does not get down on his knees and confess.
But also, just like, if you want to satisfy this guy, just be like, hey, God, I'm sorry. God says he forgives me. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like...
I called him on the phone earlier. He said it's fine.
I purchased this thing from a priest that says I'm getting into heaven. I'm good.
Basically, then at this point, Whit assists Richard in his apology tour. And the first attempt is to Connie, which actually goes well. We don't even see it. We just hear that it went well. And then he goes on to see Eugene.
Eugene, of course, is not a Christian.
Right.
And so his forgiveness is not easily earned. And he has his own way of Sheldon Coopering his way to forgiveness.
Right.
Perhaps I can accept your apology, but the notion of forgiveness is questionable to me. If to forgive is to forget, then I cannot forgive you, for I will never forget what you did to poor Nicholas or myself. However, if to forgive is to say I will accept your apology without the delusion that we'll somehow become anything more than passing acquaintances, then yes, I suppose I can forgive you under those terms.
Was that a yes?
A conditional yes.
I'll take it.
Because it wasn't locked down, you'll take it.
And then he twists the knife there at the end.
You can really hear the anguish in Eugene's voice as he's trying to figure out what's going on. You really see him not making eye contact. With Richard, which is an incredible thing to do in an audio-only medium. To fully see I can't actually confront this head on, but I'm going to calculate it through in my head. And I genuinely thought it was very sweet. I think this episode... Yeah,
it's just
I mean, he was a brilliant talent.
First thing that happens is Richard comes in and is like, hey, I want to apologize. And Eugene's like, surely you jest. Like, which of course he says because he's Eugene. But he says it in a tone that is basically, get the fuck out of here.
And he also says very seriously to Richard, what about Nicholas?
Yeah.
Like, you have to go and apologize to him too. And I assume they just couldn't get Dick Beals on this show. But
right.
But he's like, that's actually more important than my forgiveness.
Than me.
What does it mean actually to atone for something or to forgive someone? Because I think at the end of this scene, it shows that Eugene is not really offering forgiveness.
No.
Because of that twist of the knife at the end.
I do generally think that we get to see very different facets of forgiveness over the course of this episode. We get to see, outright, I will never forgive you. We get to see, it's going to be really hard for me to forgive you. We get, in Eugene's case, I'll forgive you, but with this very strong caveat.
Right. As long as I basically never have to see you again.
Yeah. And we have Whit's forgiveness, which seems to be all encompassing. Like, it's just like he's the only one who's like truly like, yeah, water under the bridge. But that's because he's been, endowed by God with this superhuman ability.
Whit wasn't personally harmed by much of this. He lost a couple days of business, but we also know that Whit's End doesn't make money.
Right. It's $137 a day.
It also helps that for Whit, like Richard Maxwell really fucking helped him out of a jam in Chicago. Like
after giving him a TBI, but
well, there does seem to also be like this morality thing too of like he truly believes that when Richard went to jail, he came out and all of his sins are wiped clean. He doesn't hold a grudge because he assumes that the system worked.
Right.
This episode is about the forgivers. It's not about Richard. This is not an episode where Richard really reacts in a different way, which I think actually would have been a more interesting episode because we see in Waylaid in the Witty City that Richard is still
carrying a lot.
Not someone that you want to spend a lot of time with, probably.
No.
Like, he's got some issues still.
And again,
he knocked Whit out.
He fucking blackjacked him and dragged him down a manhole.
Well, to be clear, he blackjacked him after dragging him down the manhole. Yeah. So he interacts with Lucy. Lucy's like not willing to do it. But then, and I thought this was interesting, her parents are like, you have to go forgive him. And she goes and she's like, I don't want to do this.
And his apology that he gives to her is actually there's two parts. It's first, I'm sorry for almost killing you by sending a power surge to the imagination station. But also, I'm sorry for what that whole thing did to you emotionally. And it's coming from what feels like a pretty genuine place. Like, he really regrets what he did. Lucy is like, look, I don't think that you can actually make up for what you did. Like, there's nothing that you can actually do.
Yeah, you literally robbed me of a piece of my childhood. And it just like Whit said with revenge, you don't get it back.
Right.
All this stuff never comes back no matter what you choose to do with it. Whether you take revenge, whether you forgive, whether you let justice as a larger concept handle it, it does not come back.
I will say that, like, as I did genuinely enjoy a lot of this episode, and I think it's one of the stronger Odyssey episodes that we've listened to. And the only quibble I have with structurally speaking is that I actually would have switched Lucy's apology with Tom's, because I actually think that Lucy lost more to Richard Maxwell than Tom did. Tom lost a lot of physical property, which is obviously very important to the writers of this show and Republican mind thinking in general. Buildings are people.
For Lucy, you're exactly right. This is a deeply emotional challenge for her. She actually like full on breaks into tears. She breaks the fuck down.
Yeah.
And he asks her to at least think about it. And she's just like, go away. Like, I can't deal with this right now. And Whit's like, well, she took it harder than I thought. It's like, what the fuck did you think, moron? Like, God,
why would you? And that's where it's like, the impetus is on you. You are an imitator of Christ. God has forgiven all of us. That's why he says, like, go to God first. God will always forgive you.
Right.
And so we, as imitators of Christ, have to always forgive just the same as God. Although nothing you do materially harms God in any way because he is God.
Hey, Whit, maybe forgive your kids. Man, Maybe focus on forgiving your fucking daughter for existing.
Maybe Whit needs to focus on the family. That's what I'm fucking saying. I've been saying this.
I want the Price is Right, like dun 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 dun, like Blair every time we say focus on the family.
What? I have that. All right,
so let's go on. Let's go on to the final attempt at an apology. Tom,
over here, Whit. Hey, you should see the new...
Hiya, Mr. Riley.
What is he doing here, Whit?
Well, I brought him out to...
I don't want him here. He's not welcome.
Now, wait a minute, Tom.
No, sir.
This is so good. This performance is so good from Walker Edmiston.
Because Tom is usually just such a folksy, positive presence that to hear him actually like betrayed and hurt, I got choked up. I'll be honest.
It's scary too. Like he's got ice in his veins here. In communities like Odyssey, and I grew up in one of these, they're sort of maintained by this very thin fabric of stability, is the best way that I can put it. You can't pierce that fabric. You can push on it. You can really stretch it to its limits, but you cannot break it. Because the moment that you break that fabric, that sort of veneer of, I don't know if you want to call it civility or politeness or just like maintaining the status quo. Once you break that, you have ruined the cohesion of that fabric for everyone else.
Yeah.
This is something that's really hard for some people to understand, particularly people who are from, New York or New England or whatever, because in the Midwest, if you have that sort of directness, if you say what you really think, what you really feel, you don't just damage the moment, you don't just damage the interaction, you also scare everybody else around you by doing that. And Brian, I know you know this, that like there were a lot of cases because we went to college together, and there were a lot of times that I just kind of did and said what I wanted to do, and it freaked people the fuck out.
It's amazing. People hated you. Like,
I'm like, now nobody hates me now. Everybody loves me now.
Like people, and it's that sort of Midwestern behind your back kind of thing.
They would never, right? Exactly. Nobody would ever.
It's not necessarily a duplicitous thing. They weren't necessarily nice to you to your face. You just don't say that to somebody.
No, and that's the thing. Nobody has ever told me directly that they don't care for me. Not in that context.
Yeah, it was just like if you get that direct, you become an asshole, and people don't forget.
Right.
They do not forget. Ever. But then there's this whole thing where like what Tom is doing here is like taboo. You put on your smile, you say, all right. Yes. And you let it go. And then, but I mean, you never let that person back in your life.
You don't really let it
go. Yeah. But if you see them at church or at work or whatever, like it should be done. The hatchet is technically buried. And this is like common all over the place. Like this is just what happens. You have a ritual of apology and forgiveness that isn't really repentance, atonement, or forgiveness. It's about saying and doing the thing that is socially or spiritually the correct thing to do or say at that time.
And what's particularly striking about it in this context is that he's not just doing it. They're not just one-on-one. Because if they were one-on-one, you could do it, and that would just sort of be your mutual secret with that person. No, he's doing this in front of Whit.
Yeah, this is in front of the town's authority figure.
And again, to be clear, this isn't done. And unless you're from the Midwest, it's kind of hard to understand why, but you just wouldn't do this.
It's also very chilling to me because Tom never raises his voice. He never gets brutally angry. It's just, you can even tell when he's expressing everything that he wants to, there's just still this little bit of holding that he's doing to so he doesn't leap across the room and throttle this guy.
And that's the scariest kind of anger that there is.
And with Eugene earlier too, so Eugene and Tom have both been taken by surprise, right? Eugene, it was maybe a little bit of an accident because Richard was just in Whit's office, and then Eugene comes in, and then Whit's Whit. I'll just back out now. And Connie, it seems like that was set up. Lucy's was set up but coerced by her parents.
Right. And Whit.
Eugene was just like, well, you're here now. Let's get it done. And then with Tom, he's like, okay, we're going to literally go to the barn that had to be rebuilt after you burn down the first one, you're going to see all the horses you almost killed.
Yeah.
Right.
And the man you almost killed.
And I, Whit, God King of Odyssey, am going to observe this as it happens. But of course, his relationship with Tom is so close that Tom is not as easily coerced by Whit.
Right.
The episode ends with Tom not being able to forgive.
Right.
Yeah, they
Richard
don't,
for all he's done.
They don't give it up.
And you know what happens in the moment there? He's also pissed off at Whit for even bringing him by.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like,
I mean, it's a dick move.
And he says, Tom says, I don't care what he came for. Just like get him off my property. You know, Richard takes a bus out of town. Lucy comes back to the bus stop and properly forgives Richard. But it ends with Whit talking to Tom and Tom saying, I couldn't do it. And I can't do it.
And it makes me sick that I can't do it specifically.
Well, and it's interesting, like, just to give the last note on Richard, too, is like he has family there. Right. He's from Odyssey. When he was in high school or like just out of high school, he was working as an orderly. We didn't listen to that episode. He has a sister. We will get to that episode at some point. You know, his family situation seems a little, I mean, it has to be because it's focused on the family. All of this always comes from bad parenting. Mm-hmm. You know, he says, I just don't have a place here. It doesn't matter if people say they forgive me. This doesn't get dug into at all, but like, he's just going to go somewhere else.
That also to me felt very real. Like that's what you do. You go to a big city and you see what's going to happen.
I don't know if it's just because we're in a culture now where all entertainment and all media seems to revolve around the idea of nothing having consequences. But like even seeing it in this little tiny bit here at the end of Odyssey with Richard not sticking around for actually just choosing to leave was profoundly affecting because you'd assume that Whit would get what he wants, which is Richard to stay because Whit always gets what he wants.
Yeah.
But you can't convince him.
You would also expect, due to the nature of the show, that the writers would want to push the reset button.
Oh, of course, because they want that voice actor to stick around. You know, they want, some continuity, and they want small town life to be frozen in one specific place. Normally, everything to be reset. But instead, we get the loss of a character. He doesn't die, but he leaves for a considerable amount of time, I'm assuming.
We had talked a little bit about the nature of how amends are made and the level of directness with which you can address the injury, the concern, and respond to it in kind or not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How does that compare with your experience, AJ, from, your own life?
I feel sort of a kinship with Tom in that growing up, I didn't have, and I still have a lot of trouble expressing negative feelings or to stand up for myself when I feel uncomfortable in a situation. And what ends up happening is I normally push everything down until it like erupts in like one big thing. And because people aren't used to seeing that side of me, it scares the shit out of them. When I finally do stand up for myself, it feels like I am personally attacking them because I'm so bad at it normally. There's a lot of that same feeling that you described, Josh. It's less pronounced than I think in the Midwest and in Midwestern culture, but in Catholicism especially, there is so much that is just unsaid that you can't talk about unless you're in a confession booth with your priest. The priest will then give you things that you have to do, actions you have to take, certain prayers you have to say. You have to go seek out the forgiveness, usually of the person that you've wronged. But after that's done, you're absolved of all of that sin. It's just gone. It's like you were talking about with the pollution in society. You expunge it from yourself. Yeah. You exorcise all of that evil out of you, and then you're able to go about your life. And I think there's something incredibly healthy about that outlook. It never really manifests.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
In terms of like confession, of course, I know it's like usually there's a ritual prayer that's involved, right? You say this many of this prayer,
this many Hail Marys, this many Our Fathers.
Right. Is there also like in the process of confession, if you're talking about something you've done to somebody else, is there encouragement from the priest to say you need to go to that person?
It depends on what it is. Because obviously there are certain sins that they want to highly discourage that. But if it's a small spat or something, like if it's just between friends, then like, go ahead and talk to that person, like resolve it that way. Or they often act as intermediaries if you want.
And it's true. Sometimes the best way to resolve certain things is you just don't have contact with that other person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they will not be helped in any way by you ever talking to them again.
It would actually make it worse.
What does forgiveness mean then? It doesn't mean anything between Eugene and Richard because they're never going to have contact with each other again, right? Like there's no atonement that builds community between the two of them, right, Josh?
This is exactly the second thing that I wanted to ask about is how do we feel about the message of this episode? First of all, what do we think the message of this episode is? Like, what does this episode think that forgiveness is? And secondly, is that valid or not?
So this episode uses Matthew 6:12. That's the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our debts as we have forgiven our debtors, right? Which actually places a condition on God, right? Like, forgive us just the same as we have forgiven. Not forgive me flat, which is the idea then that your forgiveness under God is conditional on your ability to forgive others. Sometimes forgiveness is just for yourself, just like prayer in general. It's just for you. It helps you. Yeah. It's about bringing peace to your mind so that you don't obsess over every way that you were wronged. Sometimes it's done to build a community back up. And sometimes it can't do that, right? In which case it's just for yourself. There are ways that unfortunately this gets weaponized. I see this especially in more like fundamentalist Baptist scenes, the weaponization of the term bitterness, because bitterness is also a sin, right? And if you go really far with this, every sin is equal, right? Every single sin, no matter what was done to you, if you are bitter about it, you're committing the same number of sins. Right. I have cousins who were homeschooled in the Bill Gothard materials and curricula. Bill Gothard is famously a serial sexual abuser now. Everyone knows that. And the Duggars also taught their children using this curriculum.
And Josh Duggar is a pedophile.
And of course, we know about Josh Duggar and Josh Duggar's sexual offenses towards his younger siblings.
Right.
The Bill Gothard stuff, that series of educational books, not only includes math and the Bible and whatever, it includes stuff that's like, hey, so my child has been sexually abused by a family member. Here's a worksheet on how we can go through that. And that worksheet is basically built just for the victims to eradicate their sin of bitterness.
I hate how specific that is.
Yeah, it's extremely specific. And because it's rampant in these isolated homeschooling communities. I mean, to be honest, it's rampant everywhere, right? Sexual abuse is just fucking all over the place.
But in the case of this kind of thing, it's about giving an out for that behavior so that the person doesn't actually have to be held account for their offenses.
There are ways that you have to account for certain things that go beyond the idea of punishment and forgiveness, right?
Yes.
That go towards removing active danger.
Yes.
And learning how to truly address something. Richard Maxwell, in this case, we talk about he's a pedophile. It's mostly just bad writing that makes him that way.
He's not really a pedophile. Right. Just to be very clear to our listeners. Richard Maxwell's pedophilia is a joke, asterisk. Insofar as like he says some weird shit, but
it's because he's a villainous character and they have child characters that they wanted involved in the plot line.
Right.
And it comes across real bad.
Yeah, it comes across very, very poorly. But it's also, he is voiced by an adult and Lucy is voiced by a child. And it just really puts that in stark contrast.
But like the depiction of him here is someone who his real crimes are just being a bad dude and doing arson.
Right.
And he is clearly trying not to be a bad dude and trying not to do arson now. He is sincere about what he says. And the way that forgiveness becomes ritualized has kind of mutated out of this too. I think like corporate culture, usually it used to be in America, no apologies for anything ever, right? You do everything confidently, except in like, Japan, corporate apologies have always been a big part of sort of the theater of that. You can see that at the end of The Bad Sleep Well, where the CEO is like, we're very sorry. We're very sorry. He's bowing to the cameras. He goes back into his office and like, fuck it. And in America, that's become more common in like since the Obama era.
Yep.
Where it's like and you can read like Robin DiAngelo's book and how she goes through this like whole process of how she apologizes to people. Like what's the corporate approved like HR way of apologizing to people? And it's interesting how quickly that sort of came up and how quickly it's being discarded now. Right?
Yeah, it
apologies aren't worth shit. We're in the Trump era. Like, if you just don't say anything, it's gonna go away.
It sort of depends, though, right? Like, to that point of like corporate responsibility or corporate apology, or whatever the fuck that means. That script sort of that you talk about, the like Robin DiAngelo thing, is not actually about harm reduction, right? It isn't about making sure that people who work in a workplace where they are systemically discriminated against, it's not about doing any of that, about fixing any of those issues. It's fundamentally just about making that person feel a little bit bad about what they did and then giving them an out so that they can prove that they're woke now. And
and it's calibrated language more than anything else. It's just about how to say something so that you don't accidentally stick your foot in your mouth, which a real apology in a real person-to-person situation, you have to risk that. There has to be a risk of it. And there's always,
then the company could be liable.
Yeah, and there's always the risk of, but like Robin DiAngelo, she's selling her book to say this is what you do interpersonally too. Like, this goes beyond the corporate stuff that I do. This is what you should apply in your life.
Because corporate relationships to a lot of people are also just private relationships. Like, especially those in higher positions of power, it's just like, well, we treat this office like a family. And it's like, it's not a fucking family. It's a workplace. Your work coworkers aren't your family. The office.
Yeah, and that... It's interesting the place that has in our culture today, how relatively new that is, and how it's mostly being thrown apart for a system that's like, actually, what we're really focused on anyway is just the getting forgiven.
Yes.
Rather than the real aspect of things that's like, sometimes you just don't come back.
Which, to this episode's credit, it does dabble in, right? There is, I mean, Tom ends the episode actively like trying and praying to God for like the ability to forgive Maxwell, but he can't. It's just something that he fundamentally can't do. I think the one thing that this episode doesn't cover, which I'm a little sad it doesn't, is Maxwell trying to forgive himself.
Yeah.
Because self-forgiveness is a thing that I think is incredibly difficult to do, even when you've gotten forgiveness from the wronged party. You know, it's the shower thought that creeps in. Oh, God, I can't believe I did that, even though it's been like fucking 10 years.
And I was literally in prison.
It just burns itself into your brain. I think that the message of the episode is that because we never get Maxwell's position, it is about how do you deal with people who have wronged you? And ultimately, forgiveness is used as a tool to move on and to not carry the weight of the wrong done to you, which, as Brian, as you said, is weaponized as bitterness a lot. But there is some truth in just like unburdening yourself of just having to worry about it anymore, of just being able to do that. And I know that it's so incredibly difficult to do, and it's not for every single circumstance. There are people that who have wronged you that you just can't ever forgive. I have a few of those. You know, I think we all do. It eventually just becomes a thing that you're poisoning yourself, you know?
I forgive both of you for all of the things that you've done to me over the years.
Yeah, I will never forgive the tiny country boy his prejudices, though.
That's true.
He has taken no actions.
He deserves to be canceled for that one for sure. Let's move on to the final episode in our set here, A Rathbone of Contention. And this is sort of tying up some of the loose plot ends from the stuff that we just listened to, and also setting some stuff up that's going to pay off in a big way later on.
And like AJ said, he didn't piece it together until listening to that clip from Waylaid in the Windy City again. And that was deliberate. They didn't want you to think too much about Regis Blackgaard as they were getting into this episode.
Yeah.
Right. Even though his fingerprints are all over this plan. Yeah. In fact, it actually begins with the destroying of Blackgaard's legacy by demolishing the shit out of Blackgaard's castle.
And a prayer.
Father God, we have mixed feelings at this moment. Bitterness, anger, sadness, and even hatred at Dr. Blackgaard and Richard Maxwell. We've each confessed those feelings on a piece of paper, Father, and nailed them to the last remaining wall of Blackgaard's castle.
Like Martin Luther before us.
As that wall crumbles to dust, we ask that you destroy those feelings within us and tear down the walls that surround our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, Charlie, you there? Stand clear!
There goes the ball.
And now everyone in that clip has mesothelioma.
Right. AJ, it's that guy. He's back.
Charlie, put down the dresses. We got to bulldoze this thing now. I got a big order out of Shanghai. No, bulldoze.
I'm still on my union break for the next 3 hours.
We're skyscraping.
The whole writing down the feelings on a piece of paper thing is a little on the nose. I kind of liked it, though. I thought that was nice.
I actually think it's something you do. It's something people actually do.
Yeah.
It feels
real.
like a very lived-in ritual. Like, I kind of dug it. It's just like, okay, it's done. We bulldozed it.
Great way to kind of do that.
And that's, they're not forgiving Regis Blackgaard there, but it is
absolutely not.
It is the same thing. Like at the end of the day, this is them, like we were saying, setting it aside, putting it in the background and moving on to a new life with a new big Radio Shack.
Absolutely.
Please take our pain by littering.
By the way, AJ, your construction friend, back again.
Yes, with the right arm swing.
This just feels like it's for AJ. I feel like you would, in writing something, you would have a random guy with a goofy voice in. Like you would do this. You would write this in here.
No, I would. But that goofy guy would then be having like really terrible problems at home. And make you feel really bad for laughing at his goofy voice. That's my bread and butter.
He'd start like confessing to like way too much about what's going on in his personal life.
Yeah, just immediately off the bat, unprompted, because no one ever talks to him because he doesn't have a name.
Right.
Here's the thing that I love about unnamed voices in things, or like minor characters in things, is that it allows you an opportunity to get into the world and inject a little more reality into it in an unexpected way, which is a thing I always find incredibly funny. So I love having these characters because, if this were an episode we covered before the break, he would probably have a whole commercial about his construction company. Do you know what I mean? Like I love the opportunity for that. And I love that it's always never intended by the creators, that it gives you a sort of, little personal ownership of it. I just don't care about this particular voice. Usually, yes. But this guy, fuck off, make your dresses.
Lucy stays behind at the site and Rodney shows up. Rodney Rathbone, who we'll remember from previous episodes is a rascally. Yeah. He started out being written as sort of the schoolyard bully, but they kind of ended up writing that out in favor of just being a general rapscallion.
Yes. We've met the Rathbones before. This is not their introduction, even though it's the introduction of the Electric Palace. We had skipped ahead for 60s something where it already existed. But Rodney appeared about 50 episodes ago, and Bart appeared not that long after that when they remade the episode about stealing apples. So here we are. Rodney is so excited because his pop is getting a new business.
Don't call him that.
Thank you. You're picking up on the recurring jokes already.
Jokes is generous.
Jokes is extremely generous.
And, Bart is so happy. He goes over to Whit's End and he starts telling them about it. And Rodney's doing the advertising.
Right.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, that's some sign you're wearing, Rodney.
Like it? It's one of these sandwich boards. I made it myself.
Come to the grand opening of the Electric Palace.
What do you think?
Sandy.
There's only one L in electric.
I told you, Rodney.
Hey, I'm in charge of promotion, not spelling.
So it is true. You're really opening a business.
Yeah, well, technically it's owned by the Webster Development Company out of Chicago.
Webster. I've heard of them.
Yeah, well, they're one of the huge conglomerates. Want to start a chain of electric palaces across the country?
Why has Whit heard of
the one here in Odyssey?
They're Chicago-based.
Franchising it.
Oh, I guess.
You know what I mean?
Whit has heard of Webster Development because, AJ, so have you. Fun fact.
They're a dictionary company?
No.
That would be really funny.
They're
rival to encyclopedia.
Even though they are based out of Chicago, as
Chicago,
as Bart
which
says,
is the name of a Pokemon.
They are interested in land and retail space. And back in the episode when Whit's wife died of strep throat in the kidneys.
Was Glossman bidding on behalf of Webster?
Webster Development Firm was building a strip mall with an arcade with Philip Glossman, who you'll remember as the custodian of the old Blackgaard's castle as he laid out in Waylaid in the Windy City.
Yeah.
More like Grossman, though.
Yeah. It goes without saying.
So this is once again
just
the
dripping
big
in slime.
city conglomerates coming to tear down Middle America with chain Radio Shacks.
It's okay if it's a big city holding company as long as it's held by somebody from real America.
As long as it's held by a good Christian man who wants to make an unprofitable ice cream parlor.
Walmart can decimate the local economy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
as long as
Sam
he believes
Walton,
in Jesus.
Good middle American fella. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right there in the heartland. But so I've been watching a lot of Twin Peaks lately, which I think I may have mentioned on this pod before. But Rodney Rathbone not entering to the jazzy music that all the bad boys of Twin Peaks and like he is such a T-bird. It's actually crazy. It also shows that the public education in Odyssey is failing its students because it's failing the Rodney Rathbones of the town.
Yeah. I believe it has been established that Rodney is 16 years old and in middle school.
Okay.
Yeah, and almost and not illiterate. He can't read and write. He's just very bad at it.
Yeah.
And
he's sort of a Charlie Kelly figure at this point.
Yeah. He actually is very much a Charlie Kelly figure in how they write him.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And Bart is Frank Reynolds.
Yeah.
He just walks into Whit's End offering eggs to any and all.
Does that make Dora Sweet D?
I think it does, yeah.
I just keep hearing this name, Regis Blackgaard. Regis Blackgaard. There is no Regis Blackgaard in HR.
We learned that not only is Webster bankrolling this, they're also really accelerating the construction of this thing.
They're getting this place put up.
They're getting
in
permits
2
expedited.
Weeks. Yeah, because Bart has a lot of friends. He has a lot of friends in the construction scene.
He used to run a sweatshop, so he's got all the seamstresses working for him on the construction now.
I will say, partially, this bolsters my theory of Bart Rathbone being Italian. However, of course, we know that in the Detroit and Western Ohio area, there was also Jewish organized crime.
Also could be that he's Chaldean. I'm serious. The fucking Chaldean mafia is a big deal in the Midwest.
Fuck.
So what ends up happening next is, Bart is in classic Bart nature, doing his best to cut corners in the process and, save some money because he doesn't want to spend money.
Because he's a famously thrifty person.
Incredibly thrifty and cuts corners for the sake of constructing new buildings.
Attend the tale of Rathbone be the cheapest man in Odyssey.
He and Rodney have these twin schemes. Rodney is getting Lucy to volunteer on spec. To make flyers. And he says, only if I like them will I pay you $25. He says $50.
Down
and then
from
Bart's
50.
Eugene is hired to help with computers. And so Bart's like, so you know electricity, right? Why don't you wire the whole building for no cost?
Bart designates Eugene as the master electrician for the entire build.
The main circuit box?
That's right. Notice something odd about it?
Well, yes, none of the wires appear to be attached.
Nobody gets to the heart of a problem as quick as you. Up to now, we've been powering the place with a generator. But it's time for that to stop. I want you to fix the circuit box.
Fix it?
Yeah, attach the wires.
Am I to understand that you wish me to wire your building?
No, I don't wish you to do it. I want you to do it.
By the way, a couple things here that I wanted to note.
Yeah.
First of all, you can hear that the production quality of this show keeps getting better and better.
Yeah.
The background noise of the construction is excellent.
Yeah, well, and speaking of and Foley and sort of things like that, the way that these episodes have been written in terms of identifying place and where you are in that place has been getting more and more specific and more masterful. Back in the Chicago episode, Whit and Connie pass by a doorman and he says, here, let me get the door for you. And you perfectly know that they're going from outside to inside and it happens exactly at the right point in the conversation.
Now we're in the hotel. They don't have to do that. Yeah.
It's really lovely.
And they did rely on those crutches earlier. In fact, I was surprised, jumping back to that episode a second, I was surprised that Richard was like, and how about this? My gun.
Yeah, instead of just saying, how about this? Because it was very clear at that point that he was pulling out a gun. Yeah.
And then a couple other people mentioned that it was a gun. I don't know why anyway.
That was one of those places where it really slips up because otherwise they have figured it out. They know how to tell a story without giving too much most of the time.
I also imagine that the electric palace is like a Fry's Electronics, so it's just a giant pyramid. And now that I know it's freaking Blackgaard to have, like a pyramid base. I'm sorry.
Who is that man with that voice? Who could it possibly be? He sounds like so many other guys.
Have we gotten to the point where Bart talks about keeping Rodney off the streets? Like him running his scheme with the flyers keeps Rodney off the mean streets of Odyssey.
Yeah, I wanted to grab this clip. It's not important to the plot of this episode, but Bart has a one-sided fin call.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. Everything is going according to schedule. I did finally get an electrician. He's wiring the place right now. Well, we'll be ready for the building inspector. Don't you worry. Yes, sir, I know that you shouldn't worry, but I should, and I am, but only because there's absolutely nothing to worry about. No, sir, I don't really know what I'm talking about. But the building will be ready. You can count on it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, goodbye. Yeah, right.
So, you got an electrician, eh, Pop?
Yeah, and don't call me Pop.
Okay, Pop. Where'd you find him?
In the computers. It's, Eugenie.
I didn't know he was an electrician.
He knows enough to get us by the inspector. Besides, his price was right.
Well, how much you paying him?
Nothing.
That's my Pop.
Don't call me that.
I wonder who he was on the phone with. What kind of a man whom he calls Sir would make him that nervous? Him, Bart Rathbone, the never nervous man.
Ooh.
Yes.
Rodney's not paying Lucy either. Like, nobody's paying, because again, they're cheap, guys. Get it? They're cheap.
I'm going to say this feels super anti-Semitic.
They like to get other people to do stuff for them and not pay them, especially on Saturdays.
Also, why don't call him Pop? I don't understand.
Also, Whit doesn't pay his employees shit.
Exactly.
Whit doesn't fucking pay his employees any goddamn money at all.
This is something that I wanted to mention was that when Bart goes over to Whit's End to recruit Eugene, he has to ask Whit's permission to employ him.
Yeah.
Rather than just
he's a fucking part-time employee at an ice cream shop.
Maybe Bart should just have walked up and been like, it also, why did they never secure the terms of employment in the first place? Yeah. Why didn't Eugene make sure that he was going to get paid? It doesn't make sense.
Eugene, Connie, Union now, organize.
Organize, overthrow Whit's End. It hurts my brain that they're conniving like two villains in like musical theater. Mm-hmm. Like they lean, it's like, we're not gonna pay him. Ha 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 ha. Like it really is. It's so over the top. Yeah. Lucy goes through, I think, a very wonderful sort of crisis because she's been asked to make this flyer 5 times and has not made it up to his specifications 5 times. And I was just listening to it going, God, as someone who's a partner of a graphic designer, I feel like...
Yeah, what Rodney's doing is not very out of the ordinary.
No, it's super.
The next thing then that happens is that Lucy goes over to Whit and tells him that Rodney hasn't actually paid for the flyer design, and Whit's like, well, you should give him the benefit of the doubt. After all, Bart hooked me up with these Transformers.
John.
You're not really that gullible, Whit. You're just being a dick.
Right, and Whit is actually Bart's first customer. He bought these Transformers.
Meets the eye.
This isn't even Bart's fault because this is a conglomerate. So this is Blackgaard's own company is selling bad Transformers. Whit's trains go haywire. They fuck up, and then he's like, "Well, that's not good."
And what's worth noting too is that the Transformers do work at first. It's only after he opens up the power all the way that the Transformers then overload. They actually, I think, electrocute him briefly because he talks about how he's charred. Whit mentions that he's all charred.
He sees the face of God, who is a 3-headed goose, who tells him his time's not not up yet and go back to work and do my honking.
And naturally, this sets us up for the wacky, goofy thing at the end where, Bart's pressuring Eugene to finish. Bart is pressuring Eugene into finishing up the work. Eugene's like, look, I'm not a master electrician. Like, I am not fully confident in my work here. Whit shows up. Eugene is in the middle of a panic attack. And Whit's like...
Eugene just wants to be a good boy.
Right.
He just wants... And as an actor who has done unpaid work where you just want it to end up okay, I totally feel for him. He's just young. He's being taken advantage of. And he doesn't want it to fail. And Whit's like, burn him.
It reminds me of the time that I was doing audio work for a downtown New York City theater that will not be named on this podcast, where I basically recabled and rewired all of the XLR throughout the entire space. I rewired the whole thing by myself one afternoon.
My God.
And
this is a Herculean task, by the way, for anybody listening.
Incredible. Like you're dealing with having to climb ladders and lift a lot of heavy stuff.
And that was an old building that was just filled with, I'm sure, asbestos.
Yeah, there's definite danger in it.
I think I ended up getting paid $40, which was more than the $0 that they were initially going to pay me.
Oh,
but I learned a very valuable lesson that day, which is make sure that you have the terms of your employment up front.
Whit goes to Eugene and says, you're right. Don't turn off the generator just yet. Wait until I tell you to.
Right.
Yeah.
This is like classic old Whit, where he's such a prankster and he likes to see people suffer for their faults.
That's the thing. He's not a
right
prankster.
Here. It's like it's a good thing that this happens.
Right.
But he's not a fun prankster, right? He is a mean prankster.
Malicious prankster.
So the inspector is there. They turn off the generator. They fire up the real power. Bart's like, see, it all worked, Whit. Your man knows what he's doing. Right. And then the whole building burns down.
A good amount of the building was burned
and
thanks
the
to this
building
electrical
inspector
fire.
is like this snooty, like faggy, like,
right.
I hope that when I come back, you'll have a building worth expecting, sir.
Listen, Mary, this building...
Look, Phyllis, I've been around the block.
So there's a bit where right before he, again, speaking to Whit's places a merry prankster.
Don't call me Mary.
There's a bit where he's going to turn, where Bart's going to turn on the power to the main building, turn on the thing. And Whit goes, I wouldn't do that if I were you. And then Bart responds, quiet. Like it's briefly sung. And I was just like, what? What is happening?
And that speaks, I mean, it's like, it's great.
They're about to do
riffing.
Skyscraper.
Yeah.
But like Walker Edmiston and Hal Smith were very, very good friends. They have been in the voice acting game and the acting game for, 50 years at this point.
Sure.
And they would always go to, I think it was McDonald's, and get breakfast before they went and recorded every single morning that they had an episode together.
That's very sweet.
That is really cute. Yeah.
That's adorable.
That friendship is again part of the real spark that makes this show as strong as it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And especially their dynamic, too, is very, very fun. And so we get to the moral of the episode that Whit sums up with, if you treat people unfairly, it will always backfire. Except if you have enough money, then there are no consequences for anything.
The real message is, as per usual, don't fuck with Whit.
The scripture is Proverbs 21:5. This is always where you find the work ethic verses are in Proverbs. The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. But that's not fucking true, is it?
No, not at all.
It's sorry, King Solomon, but maybe you don't have like the greatest sense of who makes money and who doesn't.
You just really hurt King Solomon's feelings.
He wasn't that. What was the whole deal with like threatening to cut the baby in half?
Why would one lady be okay with that? In the first place.
Wise guy, my ass. Fuck off.
Half a baby better than no baby, I guess.
I am here to denigrate all of the kings of Israel. Y'all are bitches. Fuck all y'all.
I don't know if I'm ready to start beef with the kings of Israel and Judea. Rehoboam, bitch. Jeroboam, fuck you.
Bart gets fined for Rodney distributing flyers all around the town.
Right.
And we get a reappearance of Officer Orion. I mean, but basically Officer... Oh, no, not really. O'Reilly. He comes in and Officer Orion says, "Ha! Oh, it sure is shamrocks that I'm taking today. And I was like, we get it. You're Irish.
What you're telling me,
you are
AJ,
so aggressively Irish. I feel like I have become more Irish by listening to you.
That's great. Doesn't it feel so good to be seen and perceived?
It feels
AJ?
good to have representation.
Yeah.
You know, as an Irishman, it feels really good. We got that 3-hour movie and then nothing else for the rest of our time.
Rodney getting got on like a littering charge for doing unlicensed flyering is like, that's definitely some sort of ordinance they put in place to keep out immigrants like 100 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
Or the Irish
also,
were coming in and they were flying before their children became cops, and you know, that's how they took care of it. It's like jaywalking.
It's an anti-ethnic thing,
Right.
and it's also definitely an anti-labor thing. You wouldn't want unions to be postering around town.
That's an easier way to organize, yeah.
All that is to say, my conclusion here of this episode is about half a year ago, a number of workers at a Starbucks coffee shop in the city of Buffalo, New York, announced that they were filing for a union.
Fuck yeah.
Since then, not only did they win their election, dozens upon dozens of other Starbucks locations have now also filed for a union election, and many of them will win.
Right.
All this is to say, Connie, Eugene, if you're interested, worst of all possible worlds at gmail.com. Let me know. I will put you in touch with some organizers from the United Auto Workers. We will unionize Wit's End.
And then you can make dresses at the ice cream shop.
Exactly.
It's everyone's dream in the union.
So what did we learn here today, y'all? Like, should we do like a Chris wrap up where it's like, well, we sure did learn about unions.
Psalm 127 says, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. God wants us to work hard to build his kingdom. But more and more often these days, people would rather put their own needs first. And for some people, that means conspiring with each other behind their company's back to form a union. But unions aren't right for every workplace. In fact, you might end up getting paid less than before, but you'll still owe dues to the union. That's money that you could be donating to your church or spending on a strawberry milkshake at Wit's End. So remember, if you have worries about where you work, just talk to your boss directly about your concerns. After all, God has put them in authority, and they ultimately know what's best.
Josh, just one quick question about that.
Yeah.
How big is this house that God wants you to build?
Oh, it's pretty fucking big, dude.
It's a big house.
I mean, it's way too big for a little tiny country boy. I'm the worst of all possible country boys.
I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
And I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
Somebody pick me up. I want to go for a ride. Whee!
Arrivederci, amigos.
What is the second greatest industry in the world, not counting General Motors, IBM, U.S. Steel, or DuPont? Yves Saint Laurent. Haute couture. Haute couture. It's what makes a lady feel so secure.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed spending the last couple hours in our little skyscraper. I don't know what that was. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to make conversation. It's just so lonely up here in my skyscraper. Of course, you can find us here at The Worst of All Possible Worlds on Twitter at TWOAPW or on Instagram at The Worst of All Possible Worlds, no spaces, or patreon.com/worstofall. And Patreon is special because that's how this is possible. That's right, we're not brought to you by a patisserie run by a one-off Adventures in Odyssey character with an inscrutable accent. We are, in fact, brought to you by our listeners. And I'd like to welcome some new patrons, Sir Sheepsalot, Morgan Bird, Clark Annable, and Mark Smith. And as always, I would like to extend our very special thanks to Tony Diddy, Timmy Sexton, Silverbear 909, Nikola Donov, Hannah White, Dara Swisher, and Ashley Stoneman. Ta-da-ta-da-ta.
No!